Okay, so last time we talked about the third school of economic thought that we were going to look at this semester, called the textbook Keynesian's Neoclassical Synthesis, right? Where we saw last week, or in the last week's material, the last section's material, that the textbook Keynesians, while starting off somewhat Keynesian, ultimately came to neoclassical conclusions because they were actively trying to fit Keynes within a neoclassical framework. So what ended up happening was you had a 45-degree diagram where it showed consumption plus investment could produce a situation of involuntary unemployment, right? That is, you fall short of YF, the full employment level of output. Okay, so what some of them argued, some of the textbook Keynesians argued, was that, hey, in order to increase the level of income and employment, what we needed to do was have the government step in and spend, okay? So that's what they advocated at first. But then the Phillips curve was created, which showed any attempt to lower unemployment past a so-called natural rate, right, or past the point of employment that was deemed to be healthy for the economy, you would actually end up getting inflation. Okay, so any attempt by the government in order to lower unemployment would result in inflation and make everything worse off for the rest of the economy. So what they ended up coming to the conclusion of was, look, even though the government may be able to lower unemployment temporarily, in the long run, you're going to have some unemployment to avoid inflation, and that's how they ended up getting a long-run vertical aggregate supply curve, okay? The Phillips curve, right, where the long-run version of the Phillips curve isn't the downward sloping line with a trade-off between unemployment and inflation, but instead was simply a vertical line showing that this will be the aggregate supply curve at any given level of unemployment, okay? Now, I mentioned that development merged the textbook Keynesians with the neoclassicals, and the final nail in the coffin was the real balance effects, okay? Because that introduced a self-adjusting mechanism to the textbook Keynesians. Right now, the textbook Keynesians could say, look, capitalism has two self-adjusting mechanisms, the Pigou effect and the Keynes effect, which Keynes never really talked about, but they found it in Keynes. Okay? So that merged, once the textbook Keynesians had self-adjusting mechanisms, they ceased to be like Keynes, right? Keynes said that there is no self-adjusting mechanism in capitalism, and the textbook Keynesians stopped being like Keynes and then merged with the neoclassicals, who say that there is a self-adjusting mechanism in capitalism, okay? So, that was the development of orthodox, orthodox theory, okay? The textbook Keynesians and the neoclassicals merged into what became known as the neoclassical Keynesian synthesis. Now, I also mentioned Keynes was sort of left out to dry, right? Keynes died in 45 or 46, and nobody really focused on his work outside of Cambridge, England, which is where he was a professor. Cambridge, England was still heavily involved in furthering Keynes' work, but not many people were taking notice simply because everyone was so caught up in this neoclassical textbook Keynesian synthesis, okay? So, as a result, Keynes and his followers were sort of just in Cambridge, England, working on their own stuff, when along came a few Americans to Cambridge, England, okay, who studied there, and then brought Keynes' message back to America, where they formed something known as the American Post-Keynesians, who focused heavily on money, okay? They've looked at what is the nature of money, and became known as the American Post-Keynesians, okay? from the American post-Keynesians, there became one school, one group of thought, known as the modern monetary theorists within the American post-Keynesians. And I am a member of that school. I went to the graduate school in this country that specializes in that theory. I went to the school that actually invented it. Okay, or at least furthered the work of it a lot. So, because one could argue it's actually in Keynes. I would argue it's in Keynes. So, anyway, today we're going to talk about money at its core. What is money? What is this piece of paper? What is it actually? Okay? And we're going to see, depending on which monetary theory you believe, whether it's Metallism or Chartalism, you actually end up getting radically different conclusions, okay, about how an economy works and functions, okay? So, I wanted to make a note for myself, something just popped in my head. So, today, I do have one caveat before I begin the entire lecture. Some of the things you are going to hear, excuse me, some of the things you're going to hear from this lecture, some of the conclusions we're going to reach, are going to greatly contradict most of what you hear on the news, whether it comes from Fox or MSNBC, right? Whether it's the right or the left, okay? Many post-Keynesians, many modern monetary theorists, which we're just going to call MMT, right? Modern monetary theory, MMT. Many MMT people think that both sides, both the Republicans and the Democrats, are wrong when it comes to discussing fiscal policy, money, and its implications for the economy, okay? So, here's the caveat. Don't shoot the messenger, okay? What I mean by that is, you're going to hear a lot of things that are completely contrary to what you're told in both newspapers and on television, okay? What I'd like to convey to you, and I will stress this a lot, just because you don't hear it doesn't mean it's not the truth. This theory, what we call Chartalism, okay, and Chartalism is one component of the MMT school, it is not a theory. Even though it's called modern monetary theory, it really isn't a theory. All it's simply doing is describing how government expenditure operations actually work, okay? That's all it's going to do. It's describing how the government actually goes about spending money, okay? So when we get to that point, which will be in part 2 of our lecture, we're going to start looking at some of the common myths you've heard in the news over the last 10 to 15 years about government spending and things like that. You know, we're in debt to China, we're indebting our grandchildren, there's going to be hyperinflation, things like that. And we're going to evaluate whether or not that is correct after we go over the actual true history of money and how the government actually spends, okay? Now, when I say that I'm describing reality, I do mean that. Both Alan Greenspan and Ben Bernanke, as I'll discuss a little bit later, have said that this theory is correct, okay? Essentially, when they've been interviewed about how government spending works, they say statements that are exactly in line with MMT. A man named Frank Newman, who was Deputy Secretary of the Treasury, okay? He used to be the Undersecretary for government spending. Okay, the Department of the Treasury is the branch of government that works out fiscal policy. Okay? Frank Newman read a lot of MMT stuff and said, yeah, that's exactly how it works. Okay? So even though this may sound a little crazy, what I'm trying to convey to you is it is, in fact, how it works. Okay? It's not a theory so much as we are simply describing reality. If it's different from what you've heard before, then I'm sorry, but I can't affect what you've heard before. This is actually how it works. Okay? So the caveat being, don't shoot the messenger. If you get upset that you haven't been told the truth a lot, or you don't like the implications of certain policies in relation to what we have done, I'm simply describing the way it works. If you don't like it, take it up with your senators and the president, I suppose, right? Okay, so commonly when you start talking about money, textbooks always bring up four things. They always say, well, let's look at the functions of money, okay? Functions of money. It serves as a unit of account, right? That is a dollar, right? A dollar is a unit of account. When I say, how much is this worth? $1. How much is this worth? $2. It's a unit for measuring value. The same way feet is a unit for measuring height, and pounds is a unit for measuring weight. Okay? Secondly, it's usually thought of as a medium of exchange. Okay? Medium of exchange meaning, I want this, someone else wants this, and instead we use this to make trade easier. Okay? So it's also thought of as a medium of exchange, and it's a store of value, right? You can store value with this thing because you can put it in your piggy bank and it'll be worth something in the future. Okay? So it's thought of as a store of value as well. MMT says that's great. Okay? It's great that these are the functions of money. And you know what else another function of money is? You can blow your nose with it. Right? You can take this, blow your nose with it. That's a function of money. MMT argues that you don't really learn all that much about money if you think about its functions. Instead, you need to look, if you want to really understand money, you have to look at the nature of money. What is money? The nature of it. What is it fundamentally doing? Okay? And when you decide to look at the nature of money, you run into two competing stories: Metallism and Chartalism. Metallism is the orthodox theory of money. Okay? Metallism is the monetary theory that both neoclassicals and textbook Keynesians believe in, right? Because now they are not so much the neoclassicals and the textbook Keynesians, they merged into the neoclassical Keynesian synthesis. Okay? So, neoclassical Keynesian synthesis people believe in metallism. Keynes and the post-Keynesians, or MMT, believe in chartalism. Okay? Chartalism. I'm going to discuss this more throughout the lecture, but there is literally no historical evidence for metallism outside of truly exceptional circumstances, such as prisoners of war or in jail, things like that. There's really no evidence that metallism is right outside of exceptional circumstances, whereas chartalism has about 5,000 years of historical evidence supporting it. And as Keynes famously said, we know it to be true for 5,000 years, but the true origin of money is probably lost in time, right? Sometimes we're just not going to be able to tell things that were 10,000 years old, okay? But what we do know is starting about 4,000 years ago, chartalism can describe the origins of money, okay? Whereas it can't do it 10,000 years ago, but sometimes things are just simply lost in time, okay? So, first let's talk about metallism. And I've supplied you with a simple handout, quick paper that I wrote on metallism. And all it's doing is describing the origin of metallism. So I'm going to go through that very briefly. Okay? Metallism believes that money was created by private markets. Okay? It was created in private markets in a barter economy, okay? And that money is always some sort of precious metal, usually gold. Okay? Metallism is why so many people in the stock market run around thinking gold is a good investment. Okay? It's because they believe the metallism story. If one could free themselves from the metallism story, they would realize gold is probably not a particularly good investment. Okay? Gold is only valuable because everyone else thinks it's valuable. Well, why is it valuable? Because everyone else thinks it's valuable. And it goes circular. Okay? However, we'll get to that in a few minutes. So, metallism believes that money's nature occurred as the following. Imagine that there are a bunch of people wandering around in a barter economy. Okay, so in a barter economy, you're trying to trade things. Now remember, this might sound familiar because neoclassical Keynesians believe in metallism, and they also believe the economy is a barter economy. Okay? So right now we're back to the first day of class. Where I said you can think of a barter economy as CMC prime, right? You have one commodity, a water bottle, and you wish to get another commodity, this pen, right? You wish to trade goods. Okay? So, we're going to tell the story now of where this M came from, where money came from. So everyone is walking around a barter economy, very primitive times. And essentially the story goes that this was an incredibly inefficient economy, right? You're walking around a barter economy looking to trade things with other people, okay? Well, you have to carry all of your things around with you at all times, right? You can't just leave, say, an electric guitar at home, right? Because maybe you want to trade your electric guitar for a cow, okay? So, what ends up happening is this is incredibly inefficient because you have to carry all your goods around with you at all times. In addition, let's make up just a fictitious example, but it serves well. This is what the creators of metallism actually said. Let's suppose that you run into another person and you want to make a trade. It's what we call the double coincidence of wants. I have a cow, they have 2 lambs, okay? I want lamb, they want my cow. So that's a double coincidence of wants. We both want, right, double, we want something each other has, okay? Well now, let's say that the current exchange rate, or the ratio, of cows to lamb is 2 lambs for 1 cow, okay? So I can trade my cow for 2 lambs. Well, I don't want 2 of them, I only want 1 of them, okay? Which means I would have to trade half of my cow for 1 lamb. Now we run into this problem called the indivisibility of wants, right? You can't divide a cow in half and have it live, right? So I can't actually, oh no, not again. I can't actually trade my cow. So instead of having an economic transaction, right, I have the cow and I'm going to trade it for a lamb. But because I can't split the cow up, because of the indivisibility of wants, what ends up happening is I have to postpone that economic transaction. That's incredibly inefficient, okay? So what we say, what metalists say, okay, is that money was developed to lubricate transactions, okay? It was developed to lubricate exchange. And in essence, what it does is it lowers transaction costs, okay? The cost of this transaction has now gone up because I had to postpone it, right? I have to go home and get, half a cow or something like that, or wait until I want 2 lambs, okay? Instead, if I have money, well then I could simply pay the man for a lamb and keep my cow, and we go on our separate ways. So it lowers transaction costs and it lubricates exchange, okay? This is the Orthodox story now. Remember, I already said there's not really very much historical evidence supporting this, but this is the story that every economics student is told in a textbook, okay? Sociologists, anthropologists, historians, they all laugh at this story. There's not much evidence that this has ever happened. But economists continue to tell this story because they want to believe capitalism is a barter economy, okay? So, what you end up having now is we need this money, right? I have a cow, they have lamb, we have the problem of indivisibility of wants. We need something that will lubricate exchange and make transaction costs lower. Okay, so as the story goes, money was developed in markets, okay? Essentially, a bunch of people came together and said, this problem of indivisibility of wants is really hampering our barter economy, and that's not good, okay? Essentially, what we really need to do is come up with something, a medium of exchange, that will lubricate our transactions. Well, okay, what should we use for money, as the story goes, right? What should people use as money? And I guess they believe someone must have come up with the bright idea of, you know what? Let's use precious metals. Why would we use precious metals? Well, because they are intrinsically valuable, right? Everyone believes that precious metals are valuable because they are valuable. So therefore, let's make our money gold, okay? So as the story goes, everyone decided to start using gold as money, and then it was turned into coins and things like that, right? Everyone started using gold as money in order to have it serve as a medium of exchange that would lower transaction costs, okay? So eventually, this happens enough times, everyone starts using money in a barter economy, and money is thought of as to be a medium of exchange that lubricates transactions, and money is thought to have arisen out of private markets, okay? So then one might ask, I'm just going to do this briefly, so then one might say, how did it turn into paper, right? It was gold. How did it turn into this paper stuff? Well, the story goes, eventually the greedy government, because all governments are greedy, supposedly, decided that they were going to monopolize the monetary supply, okay, and take it over. And then when they ran out of gold, they started just issuing worthless pieces of paper, okay? it's a real twist in the story, right? Money's supposed to be an efficient development by private financial markets, but for some reason now everyone uses green pieces of paper. Well, the only way that could have happened was if it was by the government who was out to, destroy the money supply of its nation, which frankly makes no sense, but this is the story you're told. So, in conclusion, remember, money was in the medalist story that neoclassical Keynesians believe. Money was developed in private markets to eliminate the indivisibility of wants. Okay, you have a double coincidence of wants and the indivisibility of real output. In order to eliminate that, money was created to serve as a medium of exchange. Well, okay, what should serve as that medium of exchange? The answer was precious metals. Okay? Why precious metals? Because everyone believes that they are true. Everyone believes they're valuable. Okay? Why does everyone think they're valuable? Because they are. Without getting into it too much, just think about the way everyone views gold today. A lot of people want to buy, every time the economy crashes, people buy gold. Why? Because they think that it is a store of value, right? And it's the ultimate source of wealth, right? Gold. And you see many people selling books all the time today about how the international monetary system is going to collapse and people need to have gold because that's the only true store of value, okay? Why is it a store of value? Why is gold valuable? Well, because everyone thinks it's valuable. Well, why does everyone think it's valuable? Because it's money. Well, why is it money? Because everyone thinks it's valuable. It's a circular logic, okay? And it doesn't hold up to the historical truth about the origins of money, okay? Metalism, as I mentioned, other than in economics, it's laughed at by every other social science, okay? On the other hand, I'm just going to erase this now. On the other hand, chartalism holds up quite well to the historical record, okay? And chartalism is the backbone of modern monetary theory, okay? Chartalism is the monetary origins of modern monetary theory, okay? So chartalism first makes a distinction between a money of account, or what you could think of as a unit of account, okay, versus a money thing, okay? Now let me ask you a question. How many of you have ever seen a dollar? I know all of you are probably sitting there going, well, yeah, I've seen a dollar. Of course I've seen a dollar, right? No, you haven't. No one has ever seen a dollar. What we have all seen are dollar bills, okay? And this is an important distinction. A dollar is a unit of account, or a money of account, okay? The money thing itself, which represents the unit of account, the money thing is the dollar bill, okay? Which I've written here, dollar versus dollar bill. It's the same way, how many of you have ever seen a foot? No one has ever actually seen a foot. What you've done is you've seen a ruler that demarcates what a foot is, right? But no one's ever seen an inch, you just see an inch on a ruler, okay? It's the same thing. No one's ever seen a dollar, you've just seen a dollar bill, which represents this abstract value, okay? So, after we make the distinction between a money of account versus a money thing, we need to talk about real money. What is money? All money is a credit-debt relationship. And this goes back to the history of time 5,000 years ago, 4,000, 5,000 years ago, okay? When I say it's a credit debt relationship. The easiest way to think about this would be, imagine that you walk into a 7-Eleven. Okay? When you walk into the 7-Eleven, you take one of these out of the display case, right? You take it out and you now walk up to the cash register, okay? Well, that store owner has credited you with something, right? You took this from him or her, but you haven't compensated them for it. In essence, they have credited you this, okay? So how do you get out of their debt, right? If someone credits something to you, you are now in debt, okay? That's what a credit card is. A bank with your credit card, right? Essentially what happens is a bank says, here, I'll give you money for this. So you swipe the card at Macy's, right? And they have credited you. Well, you are now in the credit card company's debt, the same way you're in debt to 7-Eleven, okay? In order to get out of that debt, to eliminate that credit, you hand over money, right? You hand over something that is a green piece of paper, right? What's more valuable, this or this? This. You can't live more than 2 days without this. You can live 2 days without this, okay? But what we've developed is a social organization in which we use this to eliminate all of our credits and debts in the economy, okay? So money is a credit-debt relationship. All money is a credit-debt relationship. What that leads us to realize is that all money is an IOU. No one did that. Okay? All money is an IOU. Or you could say it as all money is an IOU. Okay? When somebody credits you a water bottle, right? He credits you a water bottle. And essentially what you're doing is saying, oh man, I owe you. Okay? So how do you owe him? You provide them with this piece of paper. Now I know this is a 20, imagine it's a $1 bill. I don't have a single on me. Okay? But imagine this is a 1, right? You're in debt to the 7-Eleven owner. They allow you to leave their store with this water bottle. And in exchange, what do to get out of that debt? You hand them this, an IOU. Okay? So all money is an IOU. And that leads us to a famous quote by a man named Minsky. Okay? Minsky was a very big post-Keynesian. Okay? And most people ignored his work right up until 2008 when the financial crisis hit. And then they realized, wow, Minsky's work really describes exactly what happened in 2008. Okay? But the Minsky quote is this: anyone can create money. The trick is to get it accepted. Okay? So anyone can create money. The trick is to get it accepted. So let's think about that like this, right? If you run out of sugar, you're baking a cake in the middle of the night, and you run out of sugar, what do? Well, you go to your neighbor's house or whatever, say, hey, I need sugar, right? Now typically they'll just give it to you because it's your neighbor, but maybe he's a stickler and he says, you know what, here's the sugar, what do I get in return? Normally, it'll be a favor in the future, but maybe he wants to know right now. So you write on a napkin, I owe you 1 cup of sugar, okay? Well, essentially what you've done is you've just created money, right? He provided you a cup of sugar the same way the 7-Eleven owner provided me with a bottle of water, And in exchange, I gave him an IOU. IOU 1 cup of sugar. The same way I provided the 7-Eleven owner with an IOU of the federal government. As we'll see, these things are IOUs of the federal government, okay? But I provided him with an IOU. So at that point, your napkin, it has become money, okay? So anyone can create money. The trick is to get it accepted, okay? Not all monies will be accepted, right? Maybe with your neighbor you can write an IOU for a cup of sugar, but can you write an IOU for a cup of sugar to someone in Omaha, Nebraska? Probably not. They have no idea who you are, right? Plus, how are you going to pick the person in Omaha, right? Just go down the phone book, okay? So, anyone can create money. The trick is to get it accepted, and all money is a credit-debt relationship, okay? This leads us to an important point about the money supply, okay? When we were talking about the neoclassical school, if you remember, when we talked about the neoclassicals and money, we talked about the quantity theory of money, which was MV equals PY. And I said that there were 3 big assumptions the neoclassical school made. They assume output is at the full employment level, so that's constant. The velocity of money is constant. And third, the government controls the money supply. Okay? This is what neoclassicals believe. But the Minsky quote demonstrates that that cannot possibly be true. Okay? The Minsky quote leads us to endogenous money. Endogenous simply meaning that it's created within the system. Okay? Whereas people who believe in exogenous money think that the government is the only entity that creates all money. Okay? Minsky was an endogenous monetary theorist. Okay? Minsky's quote shows that all money not all money, but a lot of money can be created endogenously. Let's think about how. Well, let's say you needed a mortgage to pay for your house, okay? Or you need a loan. It doesn't have to be a mortgage. You walk into a bank. You sit down, you meet with the tellers, okay? Teller asks you, first question any teller always asks you is, how are you going to repay me? Okay? So he looks at your paperwork and he sees, okay, this is pretty good, you're going to repay me. Okay, so what does he do? In fact, let's make it an even let's make it an extraordinary example. Let's say you walk into a bank, you need a loan, but you don't just need a loan for a mortgage. Let's say you have a plan to take over the world, right? You're going to take over the world, and this particular bank will be your financier, right? No bank doesn't want to support that. They're going to make tons of money off of it. Okay? So, you have a plan to take over the world and looks great. Okay? Is the bank going to come back to you and say, you know, we'd really like to finance your ability to take over the world because that would give us a lot of power, right? I mean, we would be best buds as you become a ruler of the world. But unfortunately, the government controls the money supply and we don't have any on hand right now, right? Is the bank going to say that? No, absolutely not. The bank would never say that to you, right? Now, maybe taking over the world is sort of an extreme example, but I'm trying to use an extreme example to make my case. I guess I don't control the world because the lights went out. for those at home who are wondering why this keeps happening, the timer is broken, or the sensor. So despite the fact that I keep moving, I don't think the sensor is picking it up. Okay, so you have a plan to take over the world. The bank wants to take over the world. Okay, this is great, but are they going to tell you, sorry, the government controls the money supply and we can't finance that right now? Of course not. What the bank is going to do, and this is what banks do, is the bank is going to walk over to its computer and they're going to type in, let's say it's Devin Rafferty walking into the bank, right? Okay, they're going to create an account called Devin Rafferty taking over the world. And how much money do you need? And then let's say it's $50 billion. They're going to type into a computer 50 billion, right? 10 zeros and a 5. Yeah. And suddenly that's money. They're also going to give me a book with pieces of paper in it. Let's say that it's Bank of America, right? They're going to give me blue and red pieces of paper that say Bank of America in the top left corner with my name there. We call those checks, okay? Now, was the government involved in this at all? No. All it required was a banker to walk over to a computer, create an account, type in some numbers, okay, and give me a booklet with pieces of paper that say Bank of America. Okay? That's how not all money, that's how the vast majority of money in this country is created. It's created endogenously. It's created within the system. It didn't require the government to do anything. Okay? In fact, what happened was, other than the government had to say, Bank of America money is good money, right? But all it required was somebody walking into a bank. It requires a customer walking into a bank and saying, I'd like a loan. Okay? And once they take out that loan, the bank creates money. Okay? So we can come to a realization here which is the core foundation of endogenous money, that loans create deposits, which create reserves, or create a demand for reserves. Okay? What do I mean by that? Okay. First, let's define reserves. Reserves is just as simplistically as you can get. Reserves are a special kind of money that banks have to hold on hand. They're required by law to have a certain amount of money on hand, okay, in order to pay out their, let's say you have a checking deposit, right? You have your checking account, and let's say you want to close out your account at your bank, maybe Bank of America, okay? If that happens, then what you do is you go to the bank, you say, hi, I'd like all of my money, okay? Well, they can't give you that in checks and things like that, right? You want, say, cash. So they need to have some reserves on hand. You can think of it as the stuff in the vault, for a lack of accuracy, but close enough, okay? Endogenous money says that loans create deposits, which leads to a demand for reserves, okay? Let's say that the federal government says for every $100 on hand, for every $100 of deposits, a bank must have $10 on hand, okay? So the reserve ratio would be 0.1, okay? It's 1/10. They do that to prevent bank runs, which started in the Great Depression, right? Everyone thought a bank was going under, so everyone would rush to the bank to try to close out their accounts, And even if the bank was not about to go under, it would go under because everyone's closing out their accounts and they don't have enough cash on hand. Okay? So reserve requirements were invented to try to prevent bank runs. And if you want to, it's not particularly important, but if you want to look it up, you could just Wikipedia it, I'm sure. Just type in bank runs, Great Depression, it'll explain it right there. Okay? The important point for now on endogenous money is that I walked into a bank to get a loan to take over the world. Or maybe you walked into a bank to get a mortgage for your house, to pay for your house. Or a loan to pay for tuition at St. Peter's, or whatever. Okay? When you did that, and they said yes, if the banker says yes, he goes into the computer and writes your name, my name, Devin Rafferty, and just types some numbers into a spreadsheet. Okay? He's created money. Then he or she hands you a booklet with pieces of paper in it that say Bank of whatever, Bank of America, and you are allowed to use those pieces of paper to access the money in that spreadsheet. Okay? And they also give you one of these, right? They give you a debit card saying, here, we put the money in the spreadsheet, right? And if you need any of it, well then all you have to do is take that card and swipe it, right? And the machine at the 7-Eleven will magically take money out of the computer account, okay? Or you could stick it into a cash machine, an ATM, right? And these things will come out, which is the equivalent of closing your account, okay? Anyway, the point being, you took out a loan, right? You said, I would like $5 million to pay for my mortgage, take over the world, whatever. That loan made the banker create a deposit. Okay? The banker walks over to the computer and says, Devin Rafferty, $5 million. Okay? He created a deposit at that bank. Okay? Finally, once that deposit was created, now the bank had to go out and get some reserves to hold against it. Right? If they give you, let's say it was a $500 deposit, right? They gave you a $500 loan that turned into a deposit. Well, if the reserve requirement was 0.1, now they have to go out and get $50 that they're going to hold on hand. Okay? Just in case, well, it's because it's the law, right? So, endogenous money simply says changes in loans lead to deposits, which lead to reserves. Okay? And this is how a lot of monetary creation occurs in the economy. I bring it up, and I'm spending a lot of time on it, simply because frequently, all over the place, you hear the government controls the money supply, the government's making our money worthless, things of that nature, right? The government controls, basically the government controls the money supply, right? It's what we had on the board with MV equals PY, right? One of the assumptions is the government controls the money supply. Well, what I'm showing you right here is that the government can't control the money supply because all that's needed is someone who walks into a bank and actually gets a loan. That changes the money supply regardless of anything the government did. Okay? So the government can't control the money supply. All it can do is control interest rates, which is very different. What evidence is there for this? Well, there's tons of evidence. Starting in the 1930s, I believe, many central bankers in England were saying endogenous money is correct. Then in the 1950s, you had more central bankers saying it was correct. In the 1970s and 80s, same thing. And actually recently, about probably a month ago, in April of 2014, the Central Bank of England more or less published a paper which more or less said enough of this controversy over exogenous versus endogenous money. Money is created endogenously, and we need to rethink how it's taught in the textbooks, okay? Because this is clearly the right way, okay? This is the correct theory, yet this is the one that was taught in the is still taught in the textbooks, okay? So that's the evidence I have, at least, in favor of endogenous money, okay? So when it comes to money creation, remember, the government doesn't control the money supply, okay? As Paul Volcker found out in 1979, 1980. What actually happens is if somebody wants to have a loan, right, and if the bank wants to make that loan, well, that's creating money without government involvement, okay? And remember, how did they do that? The bank managed to create money because anyone can create money. The trick is to get it accepted, okay? So anyone can create money. I can create money for my neighbor. A bank can create money for a complete stranger who walks in and provides enough financial information about the project, okay? Or the government can create money, right? Anyone can create money. The trick is to get it accepted. So that leads to another question. Why accept any money at all? Okay? In other words, why, if anyone can create money, the trick is to get it accepted. Why do you accept money? Why don't you want real things instead? Let's take this example again. Why do you work so hard to get your hands on this when this is what you actually need to survive? Okay? Also, I have 3 currencies with me here. Why would you gladly take this from me on the street, right? If I was saying, hey, take $20, why would you definitely take $20, but you would never take 1 renminbi? This is Chinese currency. It's 1 renminbi. And why would you laugh in my face if I offered you this, other than it's ripped up and stuff? It says 100. It's monopoly money. Okay? Why would you accept this over this? Other than the rips, they look the same. I mean, they're both green pieces of paper. Why do you work 9 hours a day, 5 days a week, possibly more than that, to get your hands on this, but this you laugh at? Why would you laugh at this? A lot of people say, well, I want this because I know other people will accept it, right? In other words, if you get your hands on this, you can actually walk into a 7-Eleven and you know that the 7-Eleven owner will accept it. Well, that's fine. Why does the 7-Eleven owner accept it? Well, because he knows that the pizzeria will accept it. Okay, why does the pizzeria accept it? Because he knows that the bakery will accept it. Okay, but why does anyone actually accept anything? How did this start? Right? As you can see, we're just going around in a circular chain of people accepting it because he or she will accept it, and then the next person accepts it, etc., etc. Well, why does anyone actually accept it? Okay? MMT, Modern Monetary Theory, says that people accept these because you can actually pay your taxes with it. Okay? We say that legal tender laws are not enough. In other words, legal tender laws, it says on here, is it on the back? No. This note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. So in other words, the government says, you can accept this. Okay? A lot of people think it has to do with legal tender. But history has shown, there's a lot of examples of countries passing legal tender laws, and the population still did not use the worthless piece of paper that the government issued. Okay? Instead, what you find is, all throughout history, and we're going to cover 5,000 years quite briefly now, but over 5,000 years, you find that the only way the vast majority of a civilization has decided to start using worthless green pieces of paper is because that's what they had to pay their taxes in. Okay? And that leads us to a modern monetary theory quote, not quote, but idea called TDM, which stands for taxes drives money. Okay? TDM, taxes drives money. Throughout history, evidence has shown the only way to get a population to begin using these green pieces of paper, right? Or these pieces of paper, for that matter, right? Has to do with, are they being taxed in it? Okay? So, the trick is to, well, anyone can create money. The trick is to get it accepted. Well, okay, why does everyone accept these, but nobody accepts these? The answer is because you can pay your taxes with these, okay? And you might say to yourself, well, yeah, I could pay my taxes, but my taxes aren't a big portion of my life. That's true. It could be, at least. But, thing is, when you go to the 7-Eleven, that guy also has to pay his taxes in these. Then when you go to the pizzeria, that person has to pay their taxes using these. And then when they go to the bakery, they have to pay taxes using these, okay? The one common denominator amongst everyone who is an American citizen and others is that they have to pay their taxes using these, okay? So what ends up happening is, sure, anyone can create money. The trick is to get it accepted. You can create an IOU for a bowl of sugar, but not everyone owes their neighbor a bowl of sugar, so no one really cares about a napkin. Not everyone owes Bank of America some portion of money from a loan they had, okay? But everyone has to pay taxes to the government. That's why these things, these otherwise worthless green pieces of paper, sit at the top of what you could call a monetary pyramid, okay? And we can set up a pyramid of money. It's basically just the importance of money, where you have state money, okay? You could set up this pyramid where at the top you have state money, okay? This thing, state money, okay? It's the most important IOU that exists in the economy, okay? And I mentioned before, about probably 45 minutes ago, that these are the IOU of the government, right? What does the government actually owe you? Well, when the government prints these, right, and spends it, the obligation the government has is they must accept these back in tax payments, okay? So it's an IOU of the government, and they say, hey, we want to buy, I'm the government now, I want to buy a tank. Well, okay, you go to someone and pay them in these things, right? I get the tank, right? Oops. The same way with 7-Eleven and the water bottle, the tank company gives me a tank, now I am in their debt. Well, how do I get out of their debt? I give them a bunch of these, right? And I hand it over to them. And they say, what are these? And I say, well, they are IOUs. Well, what are you going to give me for those IOUs? Well, when you have to pay your taxes, I will always accept these back. Okay? So that's state money and how it's an IOU. State money is at the top of the monetary pyramid. Next comes bank money. Just your debit card and your checks, right? That's bank money. It's money that banks created. When I went into a bank to take out a loan, and then they typed numbers into the spreadsheet and gave me a box of checks, that was bank money. Checks are simply bank money. Business money is much lower down, and you could consider that bonds, right? If AT&T wants, some cash to invest in cell phone towers, they put out a bond, right? A bond is nothing more than an IOU. They say, hey, please give us $100 now, I'll pay you back $100 in the future, right? That's an IOU. So that's business money. Finally, personal money. Personal money is nothing more than IOU 1 cup of sugar, okay? So, what we see here is everyone can create money, which this shows anyone can create money. The trick is to get it accepted. Okay? The trick is to get it accepted. And what makes it so acceptable, or why is this the most accepted money? Why does it sit at the top of the pyramid? It's because everyone in this country must pay their taxes using this. Okay? So now, we need to talk about government spending. Okay? We need to discuss the issue of government taxing and government spending, right? Because we've come to the realization the government is the one who creates these. And anyone can create it. The trick is to get it accepted. Okay? Well, everyone is always going to accept this. At least every American citizen will always accept what are otherwise worthless green pieces of paper, right? It's not even very good paper. It's sort of flimsy. You can fold it into origami, right? It's not something that's inherently valuable, like in metallism, right? Metallism says, well, it has to be inherently valuable. Chartism says, no, it can be anything. The only thing that is required is that the government says you can pay your taxes in it, which is why state money and bank money are the two most important monies, right? Because the government says you can pay your taxes in this, but you can also pay it with Bank of America checks, right? So the government has more or less said they're basically the same thing, okay? So now we need to talk about government spending and taxing, okay? That's going to be the second part of our lecture. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the camera off now, and then we'll come back in a little bit, and we'll talk about the rest of Chartism and modern money theory.